Now, 50 years ago today, during a live debate on the BBC, theatre critic Kenneth Tynan uttered a single word that prompted a formal apology, 4 separate House of Commons motions signed by 133 Labour and Tory backbenchers, and a letter to the Queen from the campaigner Mary Whitehouse, urging that Tynan ought to have his bottom smacked.
It was the first time that the F word had been used on TV. It wasn't the last time colourful language would be heard during live broadcasts, though. In 1976, Thames television presenter Bill Grundy was suspended after this interview with the Sex Pistols went out live at 6 p.m.
Always wanted to meet you.
Did you really?
Yeah.
We'll meet afterwards, shall we?
You dirty sod. You dirty old man.
Well, keep going, Chick, keep going. Go on, you've got another 5 seconds. Say something outrageous.
You dirty
Go on, again.
You dirty
What a clever boy.
What
Well, that's it for tonight. The other rocker, Abel, and I'm saying nothing else about him, will be back tomorrow. I'll be seeing you soon. I hope I'm not seeing you again.
Yes, that was Bill Grundy. The front pages the next day. The headline famously was "The Filth and the Fury." Well, fast forward to the present day, and attitudes towards swearing have changed. The Hollywood hit The Wolf of Wall Street. The F word was used 506 times. That's almost 3 times every minute. And the BBC comedy The Thick of It even had its own swearing consultant.
So how and why have our attitudes towards swearing changed? Have they changed for the better? Is there too much swearing in music now, film, TV, or does it just reflect the way that society keeps on changing and language keeps on changing? Well, 5 Live's Rowan Bridge has been asking people in Salford if they think they swear too much.
Very much so.
Why do you think that is?
Because I've got a child. But then we forget, that they cotton on and they're going to copy you. So we really try and be careful. But yeah, we do swear because I think life's more stressful and busy and hectic and not as relaxed as maybe it used to be all those years ago.
Do you find yourself trying to moderate your language more than you used to then, now that you've got small children?
Try to, but sometimes it's just automatic. You just you just say what's on your mind and it comes out really quickly and then you think, oh no.
You mouthed a word there that we really can't put on the radio.
Yes, I did. I won't use it again, it's a naughty word.
I've got a terrible mouth. I swear all the time. I think certain swear words are incredibly useful. They're descriptive. The F word can be used in so many varieties. It's a noun. It's a verb. It's an incredibly pliable word. And I think language adapts. Language always adapts and has done since language began and will continue to do so. And therefore it will continue to adapt in different ways. And I think swearing is just one of those ways that it has adapted.
Do you think you swear more than you did 15, 20 years ago?
I actually make it a point of not to swear. I try very hard not to, and it's something that I don't do every day, but I'm always quite surprised how much people do use it in their everyday language. We work in the hospital, and women in childbirth often swear, and I'm always surprised at sport and things like that, how much swearing is used on the football pitch and things like that.
Why do you think people are swearing more than they used to then?
I think it's just becoming more and more common. People hear swear words every day, television, films, music and things like that. So it just becomes part of the everyday language, I think.
Well, what do you make of this? Is anybody out there who's never sworn? My dad's 84. I've only ever heard him swear once when he dropped a pan on his foot. Once in 84 years. But again, he probably wouldn't swear in front of his son, although I admit I've sworn in front of my children. And, is swearing always bad? I mean, you see sports stars swear kind of in their joy, don't they, when they've scored a goal?
There have been studies, scientific studies, that say that swearing, she was talking about women in childbirth there. There have been studies that say that swearing, when you're in pain, can help to, in some way, relieve the pain. Yeah.
Let us know your thoughts, 85058. What makes a swear word offensive? What makes a swear word a swear word? Is it that we're all suddenly offended by it? Martin Campbell is the former chief advisor at the communications regulator Ofcom. Hello, Martin.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Vivian Patterson's here, the director of Media Watch UK, an organisation which campaigns for family values in the media. Hello, Vivian.
Hello.
Presumably you've never written to someone asking for another person's bottom to be smacked, a bit like Mary Whitehouse.
Not so far, no.
No. Might be a method. Susie Dent is from Countdown's Dictionary Corner. Hello, Susie.
Hi there.
Welcome to the program. And Gavin Webster's a comedian who uses swearing in his routines. Hello, Gavin.
Good evening.
Susie, let's just start with that fundamental question, really. What makes a swear word? Is it that society suddenly finds it offensive? How does it work?
it's a very good point, because if you take the F word, for example, and you look in the big Oxford English Dictionary, you'll find lots of surnames around the 1300s that had that word in various forms.
Surnames?
So, yeah, there was somebody called Mr. Wind, and then the F word after it. And there was even a bird, which I think it was probably a nickname for the kestrel, which was called a wind F-er. It's already quite hard for us to talk about it, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, of course, we have to keep it clean tonight, yeah. But were just for the record, were they hyphenated, the wind Fs, or just...
No, they weren't. They were all one word.
Go on. How did that word develop then into the most offensive, or one of the most offensive swear words?
Yeah, it's very interesting. They have been remarkably constant, actually, these swear words. If you think about how often we change our other language, those ones have stayed with us for absolute centuries. And I think it is right. It's normally to do with some particular act. Defecation, for example, in Dickens's time was absolutely frowned on, even though for the Anglo-Saxons they'd talk about, they'd use the verbs that, again, I can't use them today, but sort of quite normal verbs that you would hear probably in everyday conversation.
Yeah.
They would use them as completely innocent words. I think it just is very much that people use them, they recognise that it describes an act that to some people could be repugnant, and because, it's the shock value, isn't it? You recognise the shock value. But also we need swear words. Anna talked about l'alopecia, which is the technical name for stress relief through swearing. And, we need to have some register that we can reach which will express anger, frustration. Otherwise we might resort to fisticuffs.
But does it have to be a swear word? If somebody's in a moment of stress, can't they shout something else?
Well, they could do.
I don't know,
They certainly could do, but those are the ones that come more naturally to us because we've reached that top register, I suppose. And for a comedian particularly, it still retains that shock value.
Yeah, well, it's punctuation for some comedians. We'll come to Gavin in a second. But just Martin Campbell from Ofcom. The urban myth about Ofcom and other regulators is that they have a checklist of swear words, and you trade two of these for one of those, that kind of thing. Is that the case?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, of course it isn't. It's always about context, and everything has to come down to context. And it is quite interesting now because, yes, you do hear the F word an awful lot on TV and radio. But when you go back to your happy anniversary of Ken Tynan and 50 years, remember that Ken Tynan uttered the word. It was part of a serious discussion on TV, and he actually used it in a sexual context. He used it as a verb, not as an expletive, not as a cuss, if you like. And so, which makes it a little bit different from the way we hear it today.
How's it come so far, though? I know it's 50 years, but how has it gone from the nation being absolutely outraged by the first utterance to now you do not bat an eyelid if you hear the F word on television, do you?
Well, it's interesting you say that because there are two sides to this. One is that there has been an erosion of the watershed where things come earlier in the evening and swear words come earlier in the evening. And there's been an erosion of the watershed, which I think is basically down to a sort of cynical attitude of TV. But on the other hand, when you do research shows that actually 1 in 3 people still think there is too much swearing on TV.
Yeah. But in a way, TV is reflecting real life because people swear all the time, every day in real life, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely true. But, the old saying about, giving people what they want is not necessarily the best thing for them. You don't have to have as much swearing as there is on TV. And that's the view, of an awful lot of people.
Why is the difference between radio and television? Because it's very rare. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've ever heard the F word on radio. I'm sure it has been. But why the difference? Why the demarcation, do you think?
Well, I think with the radio is in a very strange way cherished by people a lot more than television, and I think it always has been, and it's managing to survive. The internet and all the other slings and arrows being slung at it, and I think radio has always been a little bit different, simply because it commands a little bit more from the listener than just sitting in front of the screen does. And I think that's always been the case, but it is interesting, and I think you're quite right. That is actually true. But there are complaints about radio, but by and large, people know that radio is not going to give them that. There isn't the chase for viewing figures that there is on TV that I think, is part of all this.
Gary in Leeds sends this text, which sounds like one for you, Gavin, actually. It says, there's way too much swearing. I sometimes stop students about it. They say they didn't even realise. When people say they can't help it, they're talking rubbish. They can avoid swearing when they're interviewed on radio, for example, can't they? Which I'm sure you can. But I wonder when you, Gavin, do your act and, you swear through it and it's your job and it's so much a part of your life, how do you self-regulate? How do you kind of switch off and do it sometimes and not others?
Well, you almost answered it there. There's an art to it, because if you were to F and blind all the way through, there's no effect there at the end, It's like beating somebody with a stick. But if you hold it back and then bring it out like a trump card towards the end of the set or something, it's got a great edge to it. It's got a great cutting edge to it.
It's like Susie said, it's the shock factor, isn't it?
I think so. It's a left turn, isn't it, a little bit? And sometimes you wouldn't expect somebody saying that. And that's what happens in some sitcoms, don't they? When a character that you wouldn't expect swearing suddenly launches an expletive. Sometimes that gets a laugh because we're not expecting that, are we?
Yeah. What is it about swearing, Gavin, in particular, that makes something funny or funnier? And I'll admit, I will laugh like a drain at sweary comedy routines. So don't think I'm coming at this from an angle.
Me as well.
So what is it about that makes us suddenly find something a whole lot more hilarious?
Well, I think the British are a great group of people because we always want to be a bit rebellious. You listen to the very sweary football chants and the fact that we've got this it's Anglo-Saxon thing, because I think Susie might be able to help me out on this. The lot of the swear words, the popular ones, the popular swearing of the Anglo-Saxon 20th century swear words, were originally words used by quite posh people when they went out to the Crimea and things like that. And then they got bored with those words, and the working classes took those words up, so they were demonised by the posher people. I think I'm right in that.
I think, you think you're right. Actually, quite a lot of the swear words didn't come in till about the 1300s. It's quite a lot of the other stuff for, bodily functions that were around with the Anglo-Saxons. Right. But in the 1700s, there was a big effort to clean up our language because we were suddenly a national power. The French had an academy, so they could dictate what words were allowed and disallowed. And we suddenly thought, we better do something about this. And that's when we really started to clean up. But bloody, for example, which I think I'm allowed to say, hopefully, was,
we'll find out. Tony and I are still here in 5 minutes' time. That'll be your answer.
Hopefully I can take some of the sting out of it, because actually, although it was looked upon as being a blasphemy, and of course we all know about Pygmalion, the shock that ensued from that, it actually probably goes back to the aristocratic rowdies that Gavin mentioned there, that they were called bloods. And so if you were drunk as a blood, you were then referred to as bloody drunk. So it may not be as blasphemous as we think, but it was assumed that it was, and for a long time became this no-go area. So it's quite interesting how we sometimes give stories to words that actually don't exist.
Yeah, I wonder, Vivian, is there ever, do you think, a place and a time for swearing to be acceptable, or is it something that you just prefer to not be around at all?
Well, there is definitely a contextual argument to it, I think. And actually, now that we're hearing it increasingly being used not as an exclamation mark, but as a comma, it actually loses its power. And these are really powerful words because they're taboo words and they're meant to be that. And if we take them out and if we neuter them, then I think that we and the English language are all the poorer for it.
Mm-hmm. Somebody texts in actually and says poppycock just doesn't sound right to express emotion anymore. It's John in Gloucester. I mean, is that true? Is it that we do still need to retain, some kind of level of language to express ourselves at the extreme end of things?
Well, exactly. And we know what they are and we know they're offensive. And when we use them, we know that they're being offensive. And I think that that's actually quite important in our language to do that. Yeah. But actually, there are other really creative ways that we can do it. And you've already talked about the thick of it, which was actually full of swearing. But as I understand it, they had a limit of how many F words they could use. So they had to be much more creative. And their use of language in saying really foul things to people really was creative without using those words. And if we just use them all the time, I think that they lose their power, and we're the poorer for that.
It's interesting about interpretations, Susie. Do you remember, or do you know about this the Sex Pistols album, their famous one? I think probably their only one. There was a court case at the time. Never mind the censored that was their album. And there was a court case at the time, wasn't there, where it was proven that it was an old Anglo-Saxon term and it was allowed to be used and displayed in stores.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know about that. But it is quite interesting if you look back to the origins, and then you can justify it that way. And it shows the shift, because when John Lydon was on I'm a Celebrity and used the F word and the C word, there were only about 100 complaints, I think, compared with, the 1976 interview. So things have changed. But I think what's happened now is that racist, sexist, homophobic language, those have taken over as the real taboos. And so swearing, in a way, has sort of taken on a different role.
So on that point, Martin Campbell, then, when you're trying to monitor all this, the logic there is...
I was. I don't know.
Well, sorry, yeah. When you were doing it as such, the difficulty is, if a swear word becomes acceptable and mundane, then other people will start throwing new ones in, and you've got to keep changing your viewpoint, I guess.
Oh yes, that's absolutely right. And the sort of work that Ofcom does is very much based on research and what people think. But I go back to the fact that people still do think that there is too much swearing on TV. I mean, the John Lydon one, the I'm a Celebrity, was I think perhaps one of the most cynical. I mean, Johnny Rotten was hired to go on I'm a Celebrity to do exactly what he did, and when he did it, ITV said, "Oh, good heavens, we never expected this on a live programme." It's sort of complete nonsense. And it's things like this that have eroded, the whole piece.
Text from David in Northampton trying to put some context on this. He says, "You'll know the F word is acceptable when a Blue Peter presenter says it." I think Vivian's just fainted.
Time in the future. Gavin, I wonder, this is going to be a difficult question to answer, I know. You're going to need to work your way around it, but I'm going to say, are there any words that you don't ever use? Any swear words that for you are just too beyond the pale?
No, not swear words, but I think Susie hit on it before, the fact that racism and homophobia, which was quite commonplace in 1970s television, everybody just laughed along with it. Now that irks a bit with people, doesn't it? Because attitudes have changed, haven't they?
Yeah, that's true actually, Susie, isn't it? There are certain things, there are certain words, swear words, which still you find that a lot of people won't say, and as Gavin says, there are other things which have become far more taboo than they once were. There are certain 70s comedies that you'll never see on the TV again because of what they said then, which was perfectly acceptable for a family audience, is offensive now.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. As I say, I think those are our new taboos. Those are the ones where, comedians will rarely go, and rightly so. Whereas swearing, I went to Scandinavia quite recently, and kids use the F word all the time there, because for them it's completely diluted. They have no idea of the shock value that it might have in other countries if it does still retain that. But I still think it's quite interesting that all the euphemisms that we've supplied for the F word, they've never really caught on as much, and we still hold on to that one, and the C word even more. After all these centuries, they still survive. I find that really fascinating.
It's interesting when we come to talk about television, because that influences a lot of people. Steve in Wrexham, and Vivian, this will be interesting for you, because I bet this is one of your frustrations. Steve in Wrexham says, "Why is there no swearing in soaps?" And they are the most popular programmes on television, and they can manage quite well, thank you, without swearing. So why do other programmes have to pack them in, do you think?
Well, indeed. And, of course, they're pre-watershed, and so they really do have to be careful. I would have issues with some of the plots they cover, but anyway, they're pre-watershed and they leave it out. And actually, is the programme any the poorer for it? I think not. I think what's happened is that they've become used so often that we're becoming immune to them. And in fact, the first time that the C word was used on television was in a biopic about Mosley. And it was in the press, and the C word is going to be used for the first time. But it was felt that because what Mosley did was so awful and what he stood for, that this word summed it up. And that was in the 90s. And now I've heard that word used in the sort of 9 to 10 p.m. drama slot. And I think that's the problem, that television actually normalises words, so you get children using them, not really knowing what they are, and losing the power of them.
Yeah, do you ever swear, Vivian?
Only in extremis.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no, thank you all. Thank you for all of your texts as well. JJ says, "I've just realised I've never heard my husband swear in 54 years. Now we're talking about it." Yeah. Lots of interesting texts. In fact, Al says the reason we talked about TV versus radio, Al says the reason there's more swearing on TV than radio is because the pictures dilute the impact of the swearing. Radio only has a sound, so swear word becomes 100% of the content.
Listen, thank you very much to Vivian, Martin, Susie and Gavin for that. Thanks for all your texts. That's pretty much, and we're still on air, so that was a bit of a
We
time
are. Thanks for keeping the text clean as well. I'm really impressed.